Montana Territory. August 1887, the dust cloud rose before the rider even came into view, and Callie Jane Harper dropped her shovel, squinting into the late afternoon sun as the horse crested the ridge. She knew what that meant. Another man come to make an offer on her land. Maybe this one would be smug, maybe polite, maybe just plain pushy. But they all left with the same answer: no. She wiped her hands on the hem of her skirt, brushing off the dry earth. The garden rows behind her were neat and stubborn, like everything she'd managed to hold together these past 5 years since her husband died. Along with raising 2 children and fending off buyers, she had kept this ranch breathing with nothing but grit and long days. She did not have time for men with contracts and good boots. The rider slowed as he reached the gate, tipping his hat. "Afternoon, ma'am." Callie crossed her arms. "If you're here about the land, you can turn right back around." The man dismounted without rushing. He was tall, lean, sun-worn, with a quiet steadiness in the way he moved. His horse was well cared for, his coat and boots dusty from travel, not for show. And his eyes, pale, green, and sharp, watched her like he was not just looking, but listening. "I am not here to buy your land," he said. She narrowed her eyes. "Then what do you want?" He nodded once, as if accepting a challenge. "My name's Colter Vaughn. I came looking for you." Callie blinked. "Me?" "Yes, ma'am." Before she could answer, a high voice came from behind the house. "Mama." Levee stuck. Callie turned fast, bolting toward the sound. Behind the barn, her 5-year-old son Levee was clinging to the top rung of the wooden fence, his foot twisted between 2 boards. Her 8-year-old daughter, Leela, stood nearby, wide-eyed and worried. "I told you not to climb that high," Callie said, kneeling. "I was just trying to see the sky better." Levee sniffled. Colter was already beside her, crouching. "Mind if I help?" She hesitated, but her son whimpered. "Fine." Colter leaned in, calm and sure. "Hey there, Levee. I am going to lift you just a little, all right? You tell me if anything hurts." Levee nodded. Callie steadied her son's waist as Colter gently shifted the stuck foot. With one fluid motion, the little boy was free and in his mother's arms. Levee buried his face in her neck. "It hurt a little." "I know, baby. You are all right now." Colter stepped back. "Glad he is fine." Callie rose, holding Levee close. "Thank you. You are welcome." "I did not come to cause trouble, Callie." She stiffened. "You know my name." "I do. Your brother sent me." Her breath caught. "My brother is dead." Colter nodded slowly. "I was with him near Dodge. He saved my life. Before he passed, he made me promise I would find you." Callie stared at him, unsure whether to believe a word of it. Leela stepped forward, her dark hair tangled from the wind. "Mama, who is he?" Callie's voice was quieter now. "An old friend of Uncle Daniel's, it seems." Colter looked at the girl, then the boy in her arms. "I did not know he had a sister until the end. He talked about you, said you were stronger than any man he ever met." Callie swallowed. Daniel had not been one for words, but she believed that part at least. She looked down at her children. "Go inside, both of you. Wash up before supper." Leela took Levee's hand and led him toward the house. Casting one last glance at Colter when they were gone, Callie faced him again. "Why would a man ride all the way from Kansas to bring me that?" His voice was steady. "I owed him. He said you were here alone. He wanted someone to make sure you were all right." She crossed her arms again, less defensive now. "Well, I am all right." "You have done your duty." "I do not think so." She raised an eyebrow. "And what does that mean exactly?" Colter's gaze never wavered. "It means I came to see you were well, but I stayed because I wanted to know you." Callie laughed once, short and disbelieving. "You came all this way just to court a widow with 2 mouths to feed." "I did not come for the land," he said simply. "I came for you." Silence stretched between them. Wind stirred the dry grass. Somewhere a hawk cried overhead. Callie looked away, heart thudding in her chest. You do not know me." Colter stepped closer, not touching her, just near enough for her to feel the heat of him. "Not yet, but I would like to." She stared at him. There was no charm in his tone, no trick, just truth. "Why?" "Because I have not stopped thinking about you since your brother told me who you were. Because I have seen women with land and strength and sorrow, but none like you. And because when a man's heart tells him where to go, he should listen." She felt something shift in her chest, something she had not let herself feel in years. Hope. It scared her. "I have children, I know. I have no time for games. I am not here to play." She watched him, unsure if this was madness or mercy. Then with a sigh she dropped her arms to her sides. "You can stay for supper, but only tonight." His eyes softened. "That is all I ask." She turned and walked back toward the house, heart pounding. Behind her, she heard his boots fall into step. Inside, the kitchen was warm and loud with the sound of Leela setting the table and Levy humming to himself. Colter stood at the doorway, hat in hand, watching the home she had built with nothing but willpower and stubborn love. Callie handed him a plate. "If you are going to eat at my table, you can help set it." He smiled, quiet and sure. "Yes, ma'am." And just like that, a piece of him fit into the evening as if he had been there all along. Later, after the children had gone to bed, she stood on the front porch, arms folded against the cool night. Colter joined her, silent beside her in the dark. "I still do not know what to make of you," she said. "I can wait until you do." She looked at him, really looked this time. The way his jaw tightened when he was thinking, the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, and the way her chest ached with something sweet and unfamiliar. "I do not trust easy," she whispered. "I am not asking you to." She turned back to the stars. "But maybe you can stay the week, help fix the barn roof." He nodded once. "I would like that." And in the quiet between them, something new began, something slow and warm and real. The morning brought the smell of dew-wet earth and wood smoke, and Colter was already splitting cedar kindling when Callie stepped out with a basket of eggs tucked on her hip. Her sleeves were rolled to the elbow, and her hair was pinned higher than the evening before, but strands had already come loose from the breeze. "You're up early," she said, glancing at the neat pile of firewood by the chopping stump. "Couldn't sleep past the birds," Colter replied, setting another log upright. "They're louder than a bugle out here." Callie gave a soft sound, not quite laughter. "That'd be the magpies. They roost near the creek bend." She walked on, heading toward the chicken coop. Colter watched her go, then split another log, the steady rhythm of the axe biting into grain. By the time she returned, the sun had begun to rise above the cottonwoods, casting long gold shafts across the field. Leela and Levy came out next, rubbing sleep from their eyes and tugging on their boots without much direction. Callie handed each a small biscuit from her apron pocket. Colter leaned on the axe handle. "You always feed 'em before the animals. Children can throw a fit," she said, "but the stock waits quiet." He nodded, then added, "I could hitch your wagon team for the market trip. Looks like you've a full load ready." She studied him, then tilted her head. "You know horses?" "Well enough not to get kicked." She hesitated just a breath, then said, "Harnesses hang in the tack shed, teams in the north pasture." After breakfast, they worked without much talk. Colter led the two geldings in, careful and slow. Callie loaded crates of potatoes, jars of preserves, and a sack of hand-stitched linens. Levy clambered onto the bench, legs too short to reach the footrest, and Leela sat beside him with her hands folded in her lap, watching everything with quiet alertness. "I'll be back before dusk," Callie said as she climbed up. Colter kept a hand on the bridle until she settled the reins. "You go often?" "Once a week. I trade with the general store in town. There's a woman there, Delilah, she takes my sewing." He nodded, stepping back. "I'll patch your barn roof while you're gone." I left a ladder by the well shed. The wagon creaked into motion, wheels crunching over the dry path. Levy leaned out to wave, and Colter lifted a hand in return. When they were gone, he walked to the barn and studied the sagging corner where the shingles had curled back. The work was slow, but honest, stripping away rot, hammering down new boards, driving nails with care. Sweat pooled at the back of his neck, and the scent of hay and dried manure clung to him. He worked until the sun was high and the hammer's rhythm felt like breath. Inside the house, he found a bucket and cloth, scrubbed his hands clean, then sat on the porch with a tin cup of well water. The land stretched wide and open around him, fence lines stitched across the yellowing grass, the edge of the forest standing like a dark wall beyond the fields. A voice startled him. "You finished the roof already?" He turned. Callie stood at the gate, dust on her skirt hem and a burlap sack slung over one shoulder. Leela and Levy ran ahead, bursting through the door with laughter trailing behind them. "Just the worst part of it," Colter said. "Still some patching near the east beam." She walked up the steps and set the sack down with a soft thump. "You didn't have to do it all in one day." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Didn't want to leave it half undone." Callie reached into the sack and pulled out a small brown parcel. "I brought something." He raised an eyebrow. "Delilah sent this for you. Said if you're staying, you'd better not wear holes through those boots." She handed him the wrapped bundle. Inside was a pair of wool socks, dark gray and thick knit. "I told her you weren't staying," Callie added, softer now. Colter turned the socks over in his hands. "That what you think?" She looked away. "I think I've got enough to carry without wondering what a man wants." Colter stood slowly. "I can't promise much. I don't have land or a house to offer. But I've got 2 hands and a quiet heart. I'd stay if you let me." Callie didn't speak for a long time. Then she walked past him, into the house, and left the door open behind her. That night, he slept in the hayloft, the smell of fresh-cut cedar and warm animals under him. Rain started sometime after midnight, tapping steady on the new shingles. He lay awake, the sound of it filling the space where silence used to live. Below, the lantern in the kitchen burned longer than usual. The next morning, rain still clung to the eaves, dripping in slow rhythm onto the porch rail. The air smelled of soaked earth and wood smoke, and the clouds hung low enough to blur the nearest ridge. Callie stepped out with her shawl drawn tight, her boots softened by the mud. Colter was already leading the team across the yard, the wagon bed loaded with fence posts and a coil of hemp rope. She watched him adjust the harness, his hands sure but unrushed. "I didn't ask for the south fence to be mended," she said, voice low. "You didn't ask for the roof either," he answered, glancing over without pausing his work. She didn't reply, just stepped down and walked toward the barn. She wasn't used to someone doing without asking. It unsettled her more than she liked. She took her time sorting through the grain sacks, pretending to check for mice, though she knew they hadn't gotten in. Her fingers brushed along the shelf where Daniel's old ledger used to sit. She'd burned it the winter after he died. There hadn't been anything left in it worth keeping. When she came back out, Colter was hitching the last rope to the side rail. "What do you expect in return?" she asked plainly. He turned, wiping his palms on his trousers. "I expect to eat what you put on the table, sleep where you say, and work as long as your hands do." She narrowed her eyes. "That's not what I meant." He met her gaze. "I'm not waiting on anything from you but your word. If you tell me to go, I'll go." She stepped closer, the damp grass brushing her skirts. "And if I don't?" Colter looked down at the mud-caked toes of his boots, then back up at her. "Then I'll stay until you say otherwise." She felt her jaw tighten. "You always do what women tell you," he almost smiled, but didn't. "No, just the ones who know what's worth keeping." A sharp cry echoed from behind the house, Leela's voice, thin and urgent. Callie turned on instinct, skirts gathering rain as she ran. She found her daughter crouched beside the woodpile, her hand pressed to the ground. "Snake," Leela whispered, eyes wide. Callie saw it, a mottled prairie rattler, coiled under the lowest log, head raised and tongue flicking. She stepped back, drawing Leela with her just as Colter reached them. He didn't speak. He bent slowly, scooped a long-handled shovel from against the shed wall and moved in a low, wide arc. When the snake struck, he was ready. After he buried it behind the barn, then washed his hands at the pump. Leela sat beside her mother on the porch, knees drawn up. "I didn't see it at first," she whispered. Callie brushed her daughter's damp hair back gently. "You did right calling out." Leela looked past her. "He didn't flinch." "No," Callie said, watching Colter return to the wagon. "He didn't." Later, while the children shelled peas by the hearth, Callie brought a tin plate and a jar of preserves out to the wagon where Colter was coiling rope. "You didn't have to kill it," she said, setting the food down on the tailgate. "It was too close," he said. "Could have found its way inside." She nodded slowly. "You ever been bit?" "Twice." He sat on the edge of the bed and opened the jar, once in the ankle, once through a glove. She sat beside him, hands clasped in her lap. "You're either unlucky or careless. Maybe both. But I'm still walking." They sat in silence, watching the last of the clouds lift from the hills. The grass shimmered wet and golden, the sky opening into a pale blue that promised warmth before sundown. "Daniel died in the fall," she said finally. "He was driving cattle northwest. Got caught in a flash flood near the Rosebud. They found the horse, not him." Colter set the jar down, listening. "I kept waiting for someone to bring him back, but no one did." She folded her arms. "You're the first man to come with anything of him, and you didn't bring much." "No," he said. "But I brought what I could carry." She looked at him then, and for the first time it didn't feel like staring down a stranger or measuring a threat. It felt like searching for something she wasn't sure she had the right to want. "You planning to stay past the week?" He looked out over the sodden field, then back at her. "I won't leave unless you ask me to." She stood, brushing off her skirt. "I've got fence posts waiting." She hesitated, then added, "You'll need gloves. There's an old pair inside, bottom drawer of the washstand." He nodded and stood, following her up the porch steps. Inside, Levy had built a crooked fort from kindling, and Leela sat humming softly while she shelled peas. The fire crackled low in the hearth. Colter paused just inside, then moved toward the washstand. Callie watched him go, then turned back to the window. The land stretched out, wet and gleaming, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel so large, or so lonely. The fence line stretched crooked and tired across the south pasture, where the soil held more stone than grass. By late morning, Colter had driven 6 new posts into the earth, the mallet thudding deep and steady. Callie worked beside him, holding each post straight while he drove it in, her palms rough with old calluses but her grip never wavering. They didn't speak much. The work didn't leave room for it, and neither of them needed to fill the quiet. The sun climbed slow behind thinning clouds, and the wind carried the scent of green willow from the creek. When they paused to drink from the canteen, Callie leaned her back against a post and looked out toward the hills. "You ever think about heading farther west?" she asked. He poured a bit of water into his hand, rubbing it over his face before answering. "Used to. Thought I'd chase gold once. Made it halfway to Idaho before I realized I didn't care much for digging in cold rivers." She glanced over at him. "So you quit?" "No," he said. "I just turned toward something else." She didn't press him further. The wind had picked up, rustling the cottonwoods beyond the pasture, and a falcon wheeled above the tree line, sharp and silent. "Leela's been asking more questions," Callie said after a while. About what'll happen if I get sick. Or if a bad winter comes. Colter wiped his hands on his trousers. She's old enough to notice things most won't say. She always was, Callie said. When Levy was born, she didn't cry once, just sat by the stove with her doll and waited. Like she already knew her life would be full of waiting. He looked at her. You ever think about what you want if the waiting ended? Callie didn't answer right away. She pushed off the post and walked back to the wagon, checking the coil of wire and the bag of nails. When she spoke, her voice was quieter. I want to know what it's like to breathe without worrying what I'll lose next. He didn't offer comfort or promise. Just nodded once, like he understood exactly how much that cost her to say. By early afternoon, the fence was near finished. They worked to the last post in silence, the kind that had settled between them like a thread being drawn taut. When it was done, they stood side by side, looking out at the line they had built together. You hungry? She asked. He nodded. Starving. Back at the house, Leela was peeling apples with a small paring knife, her hands careful and practiced. Levy sat nearby with his slate, tongue caught between his teeth as he drew a crooked steer with oversized horns. Callie pulled fresh bread from the oven and sliced it while Colter washed up at the basin. She passed him a plate and sat across from him, elbows on the worn wood table. You left something under the porch, she said. He looked up. A book. She reached into her apron and set it down. The leather cover was cracked, the spine stitched with thread. Daniels, you must have brought it with you. I was waiting for the right time, he said. You could have just handed it to me. I didn't know if it'd help or hurt. She opened it slowly. Inside were pencil sketches rough, shaded outlines of cattle drives and dry riverbeds, one of a rider crossing a snowy pass. Near the back, a drawing of a woman holding a newborn, her head bowed low. That's you, Colter said. She traced the edge of the page. He never told me he drew. He didn't tell me either. I found the book in his saddlebag after he was gone. She closed it gently and set it aside. Thank you, she said. Colter nodded but didn't smile. He wanted you to have it. That night, long after the children had gone to bed and the lanterns were out, Callie stood barefoot at the edge of the porch. The moon was rising, full and brushed with cloud, casting a pale wash over the yard and the fields beyond. Colter leaned against the post beside her, his shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow, the scent of cedar still clinging to him. I buried my husband out back, she said suddenly. Up near the cottonwood with the double fork. There's no marker, just the tree. Colter didn't speak. I didn't love him the way people talk about, she continued. But he was kind. He worked hard. He gave me Leela and Levy. He turned to her, eyes steady in the moonlight. You don't owe me an explanation. I know, she said. But I didn't want you thinking I was still waiting on him. He breathed in slow, then reached down and took her hand. His palm was warm and rough, and he didn't press or pull, just held it like it mattered. She let him. They stood that way until the chill crept onto her skin and the last of the wind died down. When she spoke again, her voice had softened. You can sleep inside tonight. There's a cot in the storeroom. He gave a slight nod. I'll bring my things in the morning. No rush. She turned and stepped back into the house, leaving the door open behind her. Colter followed, quiet as a shadow, the floorboards creaking under his boots. The fire in the hearth had burned down low, casting slow-moving light across the floor. And for the first time in years, the house didn't feel like something she was holding together all by herself. By early October, the mornings arrived with frost along the fence rails and a hush to the light that made the sky feel farther away. The trees near the creek had turned, their leaves the color of dried flame, and every breath carried a hint of wood smoke and cold earth. Callie stood at the edge of the corral, watching Levy try to balance along the top rail, arms spread like wings. Leela was kneeling beside the trough, pulling slivers from her palm with a sewing needle and a steady hand. Colter emerged from the barn, sleeves rolled, carrying a worn canvas sack filled with oats for the horses. He paused beside her, not touching, but close enough she felt his warmth against the chill. "He's getting bolder," he said, nodding toward Levy. "Only when he knows someone's watching." Callie turned toward him. "You ever think about staying through winter?" Colter met her gaze. "I have." She narrowed her eyes. "And I was waiting to see if you'd want that." "I don't need another hand for winter feed," she said. "I know." She crossed her arms, eyes on her son. "But I wouldn't turn one away." That night, she showed him the root cellar, narrow stairs and packed earth walls lined with shelves of dried beans, hanging onions, jars sealed with wax. She handed him the last of the apples to sort, and they worked side by side in the lantern's low glow. "You ever build a house?" she asked, breaking the quiet. "Helped frame one south of Laramie, never stayed long enough to finish." She nodded. "I was thinking about the old bunkhouse out back. The frame's there, needs new siding. I could use a sewing room come spring." He glanced at her. "That what you'd want?" She nodded. "And maybe space for someone else, if they were staying." Colter leaned against the shelf. "You sure? I don't say things I don't mean." The next morning, while the children fed the hens, Colter walked the frame of the old bunkhouse with a measuring rope and a carpenter's eye. He didn't need her to guide him. He'd taken to the place like it had always been waiting for him, quiet, capable, and never once asking more than anyone could give. Leela came out with a mug of chicory and handed it to him without a word. "She likes you," Callie said later when the wind picked up and they stood beneath the porch awning. "She's steady," Colter said. "You raised her right." "I did what I could," she said, then added, "I didn't think they'd trust a man again." He looked at her closely. "Did you?" Callie folded her arms. "I didn't think I'd want to." That night, she didn't send him to the storeroom. She made up Daniel's old bed in the back corner of the house, the one that had sat empty except for mended quilts and outgrown shoes. "I won't lock the door," she said. "But I won't ask you to stay unless you want to." He stood in the doorway, his hat in his hands. "I've never had a place that needed me." Callie stepped closer. "Then maybe it's time you did." He kissed her then, slow and certain, nothing rushed or uncertain in it. His palm came to rest at her jaw, and she leaned into him, her breath catching just once before settling soft and steady. They didn't speak again that night. They didn't need to. By late November, the bunkhouse had 4 walls and a roof, and the first snow dusted the pasture like sifted flour. Leela helped Colter trim the windows with salvaged wood, and Levy followed him everywhere, asking about nails and hammer weight and how to sharpen a draw knife. Callie sewed new curtains for the kitchen and baked cornbread every Sunday. On the first Sunday of Advent, she laid out a clean shirt for Colter and buttoned it herself while Levy tugged on her skirts. He kissed her temple and said, "I'll take you to town come spring." "Proper. You proposing?" she asked, teasing. "I wouldn't call it that," he said. "I'm just telling you what's already true." She reached for his hand and squeezed it. "Then I'll wear the blue ribbon." Christmas came with heavy snow and a fire that burned all night. The children hung stockings from nails in the hearth, and Colter carved them each a small wooden animal, a rabbit for Leela, a buffalo for Levy. Callie woke early that morning and found him already stirring the fire, his hand resting on her teacup as it warmed beside the kettle. She leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. "You happy?" He turned to her. "More than I ever knew I could be." She stepped forward and kissed him, then pressed her forehead to his. "Then stay forever." "I will," she believed him. They married the first warm day of April, beneath the cottonwood tree where Daniel lay. Leela scattered wildflowers at its roots, and Levy held the rings in his palm like they were gold. They said no vows, just stood side by side with their hands entwined, their promises unspoken but understood. That night after the children had gone to bed, Callie sat beside Colter on the porch, her head resting on his shoulder. The sky was full of stars, and the wind smelled like thawed earth and new grass. "I used to think peace was something you had to wait for," she said. "And now?" he asked. She looked up at him. "Now I think you build it." They sat there until the fire burned down and the night turned warm around them. The land no longer felt like something she had to defend, it felt like home. A place that had finally forgiven the past and made room for something new, something whole. And in that quiet, with her hand in his and the children safe inside, Callie knew she had everything she would ever need.